I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up.
My fellow Americans, it has been the honor of my life to serve you. I won't stop. In fact, I will be right there with you as a citizen for all my remaining days.
That, of course, President Obama giving his farewell speech in Chicago last week. Now is the time when many people are examining his presidency. And, of course, how people remembered in history comes many years later. But we're already getting snapshots as to how many people viewed his 8 years. The National Urban League, in fact, did just that. In its scorecard, it gave President Obama an excellent grade overall. It's the second highest rating it's ever given to a president. It also gave the president his highest possible marks for, among other things, protection of civil rights, diversifying the federal bench and cabinet, policing and community relations, and education reform. But the Urban League also says he did fall short in certain areas. The report card gave him fair or even poor grades in economic development of urban centers, addressing urban gun violence, and dealing with home foreclosures in communities of color. Well, joining on our panel right now is Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist, former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. And Reverend, I'll start with you in a different way. I was talking to somebody else, and to a person, I can't find one African American, regardless of the political ideologies, age, or even political interest, who didn't know exactly where they were on election night 8 years ago.
Right.
How about for you, that night, what it meant, and looking back 8 years later, how much of that feeling was either validated or you said,
It's a great question. The Urban League report is quantitative data. What took place that night is qualitative. It is that moment. It is that feeling. For some,
where were you?
I was at a party watching the picture, and we all saw the picture of the United States, watching the colors as they filled that screen. It was the fulfillment of hope. And my first thought and my lasting thought is, I wish my parents could have lived to have seen that.
Did you think, honestly, 10 years ago, you would have lived to see a black man president?
I hoped, honestly, 10 years ago that I would see it. But it wasn't just that he was a black man. He had to be the right man. And that's, I think, what resonates for me still. There were areas that I didn't necessarily support his position, but did he come to the job with integrity? I thought so.
And Richard, we talked this before, forgetting politics for a moment, who you vote for, who you didn't. That was a turning point in American history. And what I thought was, especially as we look as to the new incoming administration, he had to have a scandal-free 8 years. And comparatively to anything I've seen in recent memory, he and his family, I thought had been under certain standards that others before them haven't. And how they've acquitted themselves has mattered a lot also for how a portion of this country was going to view them and not give them maybe a break they could have given others. And that's been important to the story, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been a very model first family and a very active first lady. We've all watched the two daughters of the Obamas grow up in front of our eyes and conduct themselves as such. It's really been really amazing as a first family, politics aside.
Yes, I like how you did that. I asked him the question 8 years ago where you were. Do you remember, and also, what have the last 8 years told us? I'm not even talking about individual policies necessarily just yet, but how he's been judged, how he's been treated, how he's done the job, and first start at the beginning on election night. Because I know a lot of people who said, I don't believe the polls. I think this is another Mayor Bradley, for those who remember out in LA, where he was winning by almost double digits, and then election night he lost. And they said they can say anything to a pollster, but when you get in the booth and you close the curtain,
absolutely.
There was a feeling that more than 50% of America wasn't ready for this guy to be president. Were you with him?
First of all, I fancy myself as some type of political strategist, right? Now, I fancy myself as being able to
By
pick
the way,
elections.
we all do.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There is no way that I thought that President Obama was going to win that election. First of all, I didn't think he was going to be Hillary Clinton in the primary, and I certainly did not believe. I didn't think the country was ready, and I think when those doors closed, he was not going to be elected president. And I was sitting in my living room, and I remember when either CNN or Fox flashed up their projection, the next president, like I laid back and I think I screamed at my son, come here, because you're not going to believe this, and I just didn't believe it. So I was very, very happy and proud. I think the president's legacy is that he's going to go down as a great president, and we have to just take into effect is that it takes time for people to actually digest what this man did and what he accomplished. First of all, he gave hope to a lot of people, not just African Americans, but to the people who've been on the outside of this political establishment for so many years, that yes, you can achieve and you can do that. And I think he's going to spur a movement of local politicians, national politicians, and I think that's going to be one of his great legacies. He had arguably the biggest opposition from Congress that any president's ever had, and I'll stand there saying is that, you know, different parties oppose different parties, and that's a lot of politics. I'm not too sure if any president had as much opposition as he had. And if you take into account some of the things that he got accomplished, you know, the stimulus package, affordable health care, he was able to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He was able to make some inroads into, you know, things that affect his community, federal hiring, background checks. You can't ask if someone had a criminal history, which was used as a barrier to keep people out of the system. I think the legacy is going to be very fair to him, and I think he's going to go down as one of the greatest presidents that we've had.
Listen, this is the white guy at the table saying this, but I remember people questioned if he was an American citizen. I'd never seen that before for an American president. By the way, that guy, he's our next president, who started it and went on for years with it and was given platforms to keep saying it, by the way. I also remember in the first week of elected office, they were saying, whatever we do, our first priority is to make sure he didn't get elected. And this is when we were in the middle of potentially a Great Depression here, 2.0. Did he inherit, forget about the economic landscape, did he inherit, Richard, more resistance than anybody you can remember? And again, parties fight with other parties all the time and always will. That's part of what makes this country good, is that we have a yin and a yang. But there's opposition and then there's almost attempted suppression.
Well, let's look at President Clinton when he came into office in 92. In 94, he had a Republican Congress and he dealt with Newt Gingrich. He was able to pass through legislation. What President Clinton didn't have to deal with was Tea Party, ultra-conservatives, and the Republican Party. President Obama, when he came into office, he was looked at as being on the liberal side, the very liberal, where Clinton was a moderate centrist. President Obama was left of Bill Clinton, and he was also dealing with a Congress that was right of Newt Gingrich. And so those disparities played out in terms of one side being too liberal, the other side being too conservative, and very little got done under his administration, and which is the timing in which he came in.
You know, Reverend, there are, and I've heard the voices, many in inner city communities saying, we expected more. We thought that finally we had somebody who understood our life. He was a community organizer. He knew what inner city Chicago was like. He knew plights of cities that have not radically changed for the better in the last 8 years, and some felt, if not forgotten, ignored. And I've also said, just wait until him and Michelle get to write a book, especially Michelle, what they had to put up with and what they really wanted to say but couldn't because they couldn't be the angry black man. Two-part. Do you understand some of the frustrations for people who expected more? And secondly, when the book does come out, what do you think we're going to hear that people haven't heard for 8 years?
Here's the thing that's fascinating for me. Not only was he not black enough for members of the black community, but while he was in office, there were members of the white community that questioned how black he was. So here's a guy who loses out on both communities, depending on what you think being black actually means. And based on that thought process, then you think what your responsibilities are. Could he, should he have done more for quote unquote the black community? His first responsibility is to be a steward of the United States of America. Was he a good steward of the United States of America? Yes, he was. Were there segments of the communities that needed more and expected more? Yes, they did. And when the book comes out, I think we'll have an opportunity to hear some of the reasons for some of the decisions that he made and some of the reasons for some of the decisions that he didn't make.
Well, I can't wait for that one, and I will be in line for it. All right, coming up next. Well, it's less than a week. Donald Trump officially will become the President of the United States Friday. New administration, new policies, new concerns. We'll get into that after this.